I personally think that it is embarrassing, more than embarrassing, it is simply wrong for us to be the only country in the G7 nations around that table that's actually cutting our aid budget at a time like this. I think that, of course, we have to be doing more work in relation to vaccines, and we should be starting with a bit of international leadership, which is how do we make sure that we increase the amount of vaccine that's available. But that is just not the same issue as ensuring that we continue to invest in the poorest countries and allow them to lift themselves up. At a time like this, with this pandemic, for example, it is obvious that the health systems of many countries are simply not up to and adequate when it comes to being able to give out the vaccine, even if it was available. So it shows once more how important it is that we continue to do the right thing and invest in international aid.
Do you think that, you heard the Prime Minister talk yesterday about building back in a gender-neutral way, in a more feminine way. Do you agree with that? And do you think that this is what they're putting forward is a way of achieving that?
I don't really understand what he's talking about, to be honest with you. I think what we should be doing is, of course, we should be building back in a way which is better. We should be much more aware of the threat of climate change. That is the single biggest threat that we face. And I think that when people look back on this G7, they will be looking at it and thinking the optics were great. Cornwall has never looked better. It was brilliant having a different type of president coming over. So much was going the right way, but did we really use it as much as we could have? To what extent is this a wasted opportunity? So did we do enough in relation to vaccines? Did we actually get some action to increase the amount of supply? Did we really step up in the way that we must do, as Attenborough has been warning us this morning, to be able to step up and do something about climate change adequately? Not just talking about what we can do within our own countries, but actually what are we going to do internationally? What are we going to do about ensuring that the corporations finally pay the right amount of tax? And frankly, they're not. And even this agreement is frankly meagre compared to what it could be. So I think G7 could have been so much more now. Is that feminine? Is that masculine? I don't really care, to be honest with you, Trevor. What I care about is climate change. I care about making sure we've got vaccines, and I care about corporations paying their way.
Forgive me, there's a delay here, so I'm slightly missing what you're saying, but that's OK. But are you supportive of the Prime Minister's 1 billion jabs target?
I kind of feel as though it's missing the point. I think that, if we say, we will hand over our spare vaccines, that isn't really... The issue is something else. The issue is that we, as a globe, are not making enough vaccine. We don't have enough factories around the world strategically placed, making enough vaccines and being able to step up and increase production. In the end, otherwise, if we don't do that, then we will continue to be saying, oh, should this group have it? Should that group have it? Have we handed over enough? We need to make sure that we are producing enough as a world, so that when we are all talking about, we may, I hope we don't, but we may in the autumn be talking about the need for top-ups and all of us to have top-ups. We may, I hate to say, in 5 years' time be talking about another pandemic. One thing we know is that we weren't prepared as a world for this pandemic. We need to make sure that we have a strategy agreed internationally on what it is that we're going to do next. Not just talking about how much do we have to spare that we can share with others. That really isn't addressing the fundamental problem.
Labour, in the end, accepted the Northern Ireland Protocol. Where do you think we've got to in this summit? The Prime Minister of Ireland this morning told Sky News that he thought that there is a practical arrangement available, but the government is saying that the EU is being overly bureaucratic. Do you buy that?
I think we just need to get this sorted out. I think it's completely ridiculous. I think that there are plenty of ways it can be sorted out, and the government needs to step up and do it. Many things have been suggested to it. We need to have a veterinary agreement with the EU. We don't have one at the moment. I personally think that the Swiss model is probably the best one that we should have. We should just get on with it. We should understand that when we sign up to international agreements, they are legally binding documents and they need to be taken seriously, and we have to find a pragmatic way through this. I'm not saying that the European Union isn't being petty. I'm not saying that the number of stops on the border are, frankly, ridiculous, but they are sticking within the letter of the law, and we need to find a solution to that, and solutions are available. We just need to step back, take a deep breath, and look beyond the sausages and think, what is the policy that needs to be fixed? And there are plenty of things out there. And as I say, a veterinary agreement along the lines that the Swiss have with the European Union seems to me to be a solution. But there are plenty of others, a whole panoply of different things for them to pick. They just need to get on with it.
Emily Thornberry, though, isn't this the Remainer in you speaking, essentially saying, well, look, it's all a bit difficult, but if the EU really want to bear down, we don't want to have a fight, we just have to be a rule taker in this situation?
No, look, the United States has a better veterinary agreement with the European Union than we do. We don't have one. We don't have an agreement as to what food needs to cross the border. And I'll tell you why. It's because the government wants to have as much flexibility as possible when it comes to potential other trade deals. So they want to have the potential to lower our farm standards and our food standards in order to be able to accommodate other future trade deals. Frankly, I think they have got this completely the wrong way round. What we should be doing is looking at what is in Britain's interests. They have always said that they will not lower our food and farming standards below that there is in the European Union. So if that's right, why can't we just agree that with the European Union? Because they want to keep their options open and they want in future to have the potential to lower food standards, particularly because they're after a trade deal with the United States. And the irony is, here we have the United States President saying, do you know what? The most important thing is not a trade deal between Britain and the United States. The most important thing is the Good Friday Agreement, and we in America are prioritising that, and we think that you in Britain should be doing that too. And I agree.
Big choice tomorrow, June the 21st. Should we lift the restrictions, given that actually a lot of the countries vaccinated, the businesses are crying out, or are you leaning now towards caution on the Labour side?
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear that question, Trevor. Do you mind asking it again?
No problem. I was asking you, we have this big decision about June the 21st. Where is Labour standing now? Do you say that we should go ahead, lift the restrictions, free businesses who are crying out and so on, or are you now inclined, given the data, towards caution?
We have always been inclined towards, more than inclined, we have always said that we must follow the scientific advice. And the scientific advice is pretty clear, that we can't have a lifting of the lockdown at the moment. There needs to be more of a delay because of the variant and because of all the other reasons. I just want to be confident that the Prime Minister is listening to that scientific agreement. You do look back and wonder whether, now you wonder what on earth did they think they were doing by not closing the borders at the time when they should have. I have no doubt there was no scientific advice telling them not to close the borders, because they should have, particularly when the Delta variant started. And, you wonder why it was that they kept the border open, for example, with India, and yet closed the border with Pakistan and Bangladesh. I think it was because Boris Johnson continued with the fantasy that he was going to be able, right until the last minute, that he was going to be allowed to go to India and sign some sort of pre-trade deal. It's another example of putting trade deals and standing in front of flags and signing them up and so on before the interests of our country. Trade deals ought to be about what are the interests of our country, and make sure our trade deals reflect that and build on it, not the other way around.